Hi, I'm going to do a couple videos on squares and square roots and tilted squares, which eventually leads into the Pythagorean theorem. This first video is going to deal with just kind of having a little discussion on squares and things. Um, I guess one thing to consider before we get started is just a reminder of how to calculate the area of a triangle. So it's 1/2 times the base times the height. And then let's just have a little kind of discussion on what squares are. So that could be a square. Squares we know have sides that are equal, so like a 3 by 3, that's a square. And the area of any rectangle is length times width. In this case, area is equal to 3 times 3, or area is equal to 9. So that's a square. Equal sides. So some new terminology we can kind of throw in here, or perhaps it's not new for you. 3 times 3 is the same as writing 3 squared. So there's that word popping up again. Squared, it relates right to this geometric idea of a square. So we have sort of a mathematical algebraic idea of square, and then we have the geometric idea of square. But they're sort of the same thing. We also have the idea of a square root. If I have area of 9, if I take what's called the square root of 9, that's equal to 3. And what that means is, this is a case where we find a number which, when multiplied by itself, is equal to 9. Okay. Another example would be, what is the square root of 16? Well, what number when multiplied by itself is equal to 16? It's 4. It's because 4 times 4 is equal to 16. Or you could say 4 squared is equal to 16. So that's the idea of a square. One other thing is, let's suppose we had a square here, and it had an area of 20. What would be its side length equal to? Well, that's kind of tricky, right? Because 4 times 4 equals 16, 5 times 5 equals 25, and 20 is somewhere right in the middle. So what one number multiplied by itself is equal to 20? And actually, that's kind of a tricky answer. That's a tricky question to answer. We can sort of guess what that number is. It's probably going to be something like 4.5 times 4.5. It's probably something like 20. So maybe we could say that the square root of 20 is sort of equal to 4.5. But really, maybe mathematically, one of the best ways to answer this question of what is s, what's the length of the side, we can just say that s is equal to the square root of 20. You could plug that into your calculator and hit plug in 20 and hit the square root button, and it'll give you some number. Let me just try it quickly on my calculator here. So we're going to go 20, hit the square root button, which is, where is that? Right there. I get 4.472. And you'll notice that goes on and on and on. In fact, that number goes on forever. It never ends. But it's okay actually just to say square root of 20. That is a number in itself. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about squares in this first video. Next video we'll get into the idea of tilted squares.